She walked in smiling, shoulders back, heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, because it's not for warmth, it's for control. And everyone in that room believed her. The production assistants, the makeup team, the studio audience, even the cameras, trained to catch the smallest flicker of dishonesty, believed her. She was that good. Her name was Mara Ellison. You knew that name. Magazine covers, 4 million views on her TED-style talk. Profile pieces calling her a once-in-a-generation success story. A woman who climbed from nothing, survived heartbreak, and somehow made it to the very top. She was the story people needed right now, so they believed her. Every last one of them, except the man already seated at the interview desk. He was calm, unnervingly calm. Not the natural kind, the practiced kind. The kind that comes from knowing something the other person doesn't. His hand rested on a folder, plain, unmarked, thin enough to overlook. But he knew what was inside, and in 4 minutes, Mara Ellison was going to know too. Because her entire story, the one that made her famous, the one that landed her this interview, this platform, this life, built on a lie. Every single brick of it. The childhood she described, fabricated. The business she claimed to build from nothing. She erased the names of the people who actually built it. The woman she said she used to be. That woman had secrets, damaging ones, with paper trails, and paper trails are very hard to smile your way out of. The most successful manipulators aren't the ones who lie the most. They're the ones who understand exactly what people want to believe and hand it to them, perfectly wrapped. Mara never studied that playbook. She was born knowing it. But every talent has a ceiling. In 4 minutes, on live television, in front of 3 million people, the host was going to open that folder. And the smile she walked in with. It was never leaving the same way. This is the story of who Mara Ellison really was. How she built the lie, how she lived inside it, and the one small, almost laughable mistake that destroyed everything. Not in a courtroom, not in private, but under studio lights, in real time, with the whole world watching. Stay with me, because this gets darker before it gets just. To understand who walked into that studio, you have to go back. Not to the scandal, not to the lies. All the way back. Before the magazine covers, before the viral talk. Before the rehearsed origin story she'd polished so many times, it had stopped feeling like a lie and started feeling like memory. You have to go back to the version of Mara nobody ever saw. Because she made absolutely sure of that. Mara grew up in the kind of city nobody romanticizes. No skyline, no cute neighborhood name. Just rows of identical houses on identical streets, each one carrying the quiet weight of a family, trying, and mostly failing, to get ahead. Her mother worked double shifts. Her father was present in the physical sense only. No dramatic trauma, no single breaking point. Just the slow, grinding pressure of a home where money was always slightly out of reach and ambition was treated like a character flaw. But Mara was different. Even as a child, she had an unsettling ability to read a room. Within seconds of walking into any space, she knew exactly what each person needed to hear. Her teachers called it emotional intelligence. Her mother called it charm. Mara called it survival. By high school, she'd turned it into a weapon. Not the loudest student, not the most popular, but the most adaptable. She could sit with the academic kids and talk university applications. Switch tables, and suddenly she was fluent in last weekend's game. She made every person she spoke to feel like the most interesting individual in the room. It was a real talent, and like every real talent, it was completely morally neutral. Whether it built something beautiful or something dangerous depended entirely on the person wielding it. She won a partial scholarship, studied communications, which in hindsight feels almost too perfect. She was sharp enough to get good grades without working too hard, which gave her time for the thing she was actually studying. How the world really worked, underneath the version it showed in public. Second year, she found her people, a tight group of ambitious students building what they called a social enterprise, a consultancy helping small businesses develop their public narrative, their brand story, the way they wanted to be seen. In other words, how to make things appear to be something they weren't. Mara was electric in that room. She had a gift for finding the emotional core of any story, the detail that made people lean forward, the moment that made something feel true even when it was constructed. Her group noticed. They gave her more. She delivered every time. By graduation, they had real clients, real results. And Mara had something else, a reputation as someone you wanted on your side. Looking back, it's easy to miss the warning signs, because on the surface, it looks exactly like it should. Girl from a modest background, discovers her talent, works hard, earns her place. That's the problem. Because early success has a way of teaching the wrong lessons. When people believe you're brilliant before you fully become brilliant, it gets very tempting to just let them keep believing it. Mara had tasted what it felt like to be seen as exceptional, and she decided, quietly, privately, permanently, she was never going back to invisible. She just hadn't calculated the full cost yet. That bill was coming.
In a glass-walled office on the 34th floor of a building she had no business being in, sitting across from a man who had no idea he was about to become the most important and most dangerous person in her life. But we're not there yet. Right now, Mara Ellison is 23 years old, talented, hungry, completely unaware of what that hunger is about to cost her. She looks from every angle like exactly what she claims to be, and that, more than anything else, is what makes what comes next so devastating. His name was Daniel Ashford, and if Mara made everyone feel like the most interesting person in the room, Daniel actually was 31 years old, founder and CEO of Ashford Strategic Group, a firm that had been quietly building the kind of reputation that made larger companies nervous. He hadn't inherited it, hadn't been funded into it. He'd started with 2 clients, one rented desk, and a reputation built entirely on the quality of his thinking, serious without being cold, driven without being ruthless, the kind of man who listened, really listened, and then said something so precise you instinctively trusted him. Mara met him at a professional development conference, one she had talked her way into without an invitation. She'd seen the guest list, identified 3 people she wanted in the same room with her, built a reason to be there convincing enough that nobody questioned it. That was Mara at 24, always 3 moves ahead. She spotted Daniel across the reception, watched him for 8 minutes before approaching. In those 8 minutes, she did what she always did. She read him. The way he held his drink, the way his body angled away from conversations that bored him, the way he lit up almost invisibly when someone said something he didn't expect. She walked over and said something he didn't expect. It worked. Daniel turned toward her with his full attention, and Mara felt something she had not prepared for. She felt nervous, not perform nervous, not the calculated version she sometimes used to seem more relatable. Actually nervous, because Daniel was looking at her like he was already trying to figure out who she really was underneath, and Mara had spent years making that an impossible project. They talked for 2 hours, exchanged numbers. He texted first once that surprised her. Their first dinner lasted 4 hours. By week 3, she'd met his closest friends. By week 6, she knew she was in trouble. She was falling for him, not performing it, not positioning herself inside a relationship that could benefit her career. She was genuinely, inconveniently, almost painfully falling for Daniel Ashford. That was a problem she hadn't planned for. Here's why it mattered. People who are brilliant at managing how they're perceived are often the most vulnerable to real connection, precisely because they encounter it so rarely. Daniel was the first person who seemed to be looking for the version underneath. The irony? The version underneath was far more complicated than he knew, but wrapped in something that felt entirely new and entirely real. Mara did something she almost never allowed herself. She just existed in it. They were extraordinary together, not just attraction, real intellectual sparring. They challenged each other, made each other laugh in the specific way that requires actually knowing someone. 8 months in, Mara joined Ashford's strategic group, not as a favor, not through a side door. That part was real. Whatever would later be exposed, that part was completely, verifiably real. They moved in together, talked about the future the way people only do when they actually believe in it. From every angle, it looked like the ending of a certain kind of story. Girl from nowhere finds her talent, finds her footing, finds the person who makes it all mean something, a fairy tale, and like every fairy tale ever told, it was only a matter of time before you found out what was living in the dark part of the forest. Something was coming. Something Mara had buried so carefully, so completely, she had almost convinced herself it no longer existed. Almost. It started with an email, not a dramatic one, no alarming subject line, no all caps accusations, just a quiet, professionally worded message that arrived on a Tuesday morning like any other piece of correspondence. It was addressed to Daniel. The sender was a woman named Claire Isay, a former business partner from Mara's university years. Claire said she'd found a discrepancy. What she'd actually found was an entire architecture of deception. Before Daniel, before Ashford's strategic group, before the life Mara had so carefully assembled, there was the consultancy. That was a lie. It didn't dissolve, it collapsed. Mara, she'd been managing the client relationship. She was the one who received the final payment. She protected herself.
She took the money. Not all of it. Not in a way that screamed theft. But Claire hadn't looked quickly. Claire had spent 3 years looking very, very carefully. And what she sent Daniel wasn't an accusation. It was documentation, bank transfer records, dated correspondence, a signed client agreement, not an allegation, a paper trail. Daniel read it Tuesday morning, alone, door closed. Mara knew something was wrong the moment he walked through the front door that evening. She tried to explain. But Daniel wasn't looking at her the way people usually looked at her when she explained things. He was looking at her like a man who had just discovered a door in a room he thought he knew completely. Not rage. Something quieter. More devastating. Recalibration. He was running everything back. Every story. Every conversation. Every moment he had believed he was seeing the real Mara. He didn't end things that night. He asked questions. Careful, precise, relentless questions. Then the damage spread. Daniel, quietly, without lawyers, without press, contacted the affected family, facilitated a financial resolution. He failed, because Claire hadn't sent that email only to Daniel. She'd sent it to a journalist, and journalists don't resolve things quietly. The story broke Thursday. Friday morning, 11,000 shares. Saturday, a message from HR at Ashford Strategic Group. Sunday, the conversation with Daniel that ended with Mara sitting alone in their apartment, surrounded by the evidence of a life that was no longer entirely hers. One email, one journalist, 4 days. That's all it took to reduce 2 years of careful construction to rubble. But here's what nobody understood yet. Mara didn't collapse. She sat in that apartment on Sunday night, in the silence of everything coming apart, and she made a decision. She was not finished. There's a particular kind of pain that has no clean name. It's the pain of watching the version of yourself you worked hardest to build get dismantled in public. Mara lived inside that pain for 6 weeks. She moved out of the apartment within 2 weeks. She rented a small bare apartment on the other side of the city. The professional consequences arrived in sequence. 12 days after the article, her position at Ashford Strategic Group was formally terminated. 2 speaking invitations, quietly withdrawn. A mentorship program she'd been accepted into. A polite email explaining they'd be moving forward with other candidates. That one she read 3 times. The mentorship program was for young women from working class backgrounds navigating professional environments that weren't built for them. She'd applied because she wanted to. The public response was exactly what public responses always are. One half of the internet decided she was a cautionary tale. The other half argued the original incident had been blown out of proportion. Mara read none of it. Or rather, she read all of it once, then deleted the apps. But silence isn't the same as peace, because when the noise from outside stopped, the noise from inside got louder. She thought about the family. Now it became dimensional. She thought about what that money had meant to them. This was new territory. Mara had always been extraordinary at understanding other people, but understanding herself, that was a skill she had never needed to develop. She started writing. She wrote about her childhood, about Daniel, about the moment she made the decision with the client money. Writing it plainly made her feel something she'd been avoiding for a long time. Accountable. Not legally, not publicly, just privately. Honestly. Uncomfortably accountable. Somewhere in the 5th week, something shifted. She had lost Daniel, lost the job, lost the version of herself the public had believed in, but the talent hadn't gone anywhere, and she had gained something she'd never had before. The truth. She sat with that truth for one more week. Then she stood up. Not loudly. No declaration. Just quietly. Privately. In the specific way real transformation always begins. She opened her laptop. Created a new document. 3 words at the top of the page. What is real? And she began. Nobody saw it happening. That was the point. The old Mara would have transformed loudly. But that Mara was gone. The new one had learned that the most dangerous thing she had ever done was build herself for an audience. So the transformation happened quietly. The first decision was the most fundamental. She was going to tell the truth, not performatively, just privately, practically, as a baseline operating principle for everything that came next. The second decision was professional. She wasn't going back into corporate communications. She began researching. Case studies in ethical business practice. Research on the psychology of trust. She was particularly drawn to research on professionals who had experienced public failures and navigated re-entry into their fields. The ones who actually changed. Not the ones who got better at appearing to have changed. Mara read that finding 3 times. She was going to actually change. The third decision was the hardest. She reached out to the family. Not through a lawyer, not through an intermediary. She wrote them a letter by hand, 4 pages, no legal language, just the truth. She mailed the letter on a Thursday morning. They wrote back, not immediately, 3 weeks later. The tone was not warm, not forgiving, but human. It acknowledged the letter. It said receiving it had mattered. Mara read that letter standing at her kitchen counter and felt something move through her she didn't have a precise word for. Meanwhile, the external transformation was assembling itself with the same quiet deliberateness. She reached out to 3 former professional contacts. She began consulting. Small projects. Organizations that needed help clarifying their communication, not spinning it. She was transparent in every initial conversation about her professional history. She was good at the work. And this time, there was nothing underneath it that needed hiding. The projects grew. The referrals came slowly. But they came. She rebuilt a professional network on a foundation entirely different from the one she'd built before. She was not back. But she was something she hadn't been in a very long time. She was real. And real had a kind of weight to it. And then, one morning, approximately 4 months after the article had broken, Mara received an email from a television production company. They were developing a new interview format, focused on professional reinvention and the ethics of personal narrative. They were looking for someone who understood the subject from the inside. They had found her. Mara read the email twice, and she wrote back. The production company was called Meridian Studios. They had been watching Mara for 3 months before they contacted her. They'd been reading the careful pieces she had begun contributing to a mid-tier industry publication under her own name. She wrote with the authority of someone who understood the gap between image and reality from both sides. That's what caught their attention. The format they were developing was called The Real Record. Long-form interviews built on a deceptively simple premise. Each episode would feature a guest who had experienced a significant public moment, a professional or personal reckoning. The host was Gerald Okafor, former investigative journalist. known for an interview style that was simultaneously respectful and completely unrelenting. Mara researched him thoroughly before their first meeting. He said the job of a serious interviewer was not to make the subject comfortable, but to make the subject honest. She read that quote twice, then decided she liked him. Their first meeting was coffee. Gerald was direct from the first sentence. He asked whether she felt she had fully understood what she had done wrong. She answered honestly. She told him she believed she understood the act itself completely, and that she was still in the process of understanding the deeper patterns that had made the act possible. At the end of the conversation, he told her she would make an exceptional contributor to what they were building. Not as a guest, as a consulting producer. Mara had not seen that coming. She sat with the offer for 48 hours. Then she said yes. The work was unlike anything she had done before. Every decision was filtered through a question Gerald had established as the program's foundational standard. Is this true? And does presenting it this way serve the people involved? It was a question Mara had never asked consistently in her professional life. The first episode aired 4 months after she joined the team. It was about a former city official who had made a significant error in public funds management. The episode wasn't sensational, just honest. 40,000 viewers in the first week, doubled by the end of the second. One media critic called it the most quietly radical thing currently on the internet. Mara read that review at the same library table where she'd spent months in quiet research, and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Pride, not performance-based pride. The cleaner kind. The kind that comes from doing something real. The program was growing. The audience was growing. And with that growth came visibility. One of those viewers was a host at a much larger platform. By Friday, Mara had been asked to be a guest on the most widely watched long-form interview program in the country. Not as a producer. Not behind the scenes. In the chair. The subject's chair. The one she had spent months helping other people prepare to sit in with complete honesty. Now it was her turn. She read the invitation, set her phone down, looked at the wall of her office for a long, quiet moment, then picked it back up and said yes.